Hi, I'm Matt from California, USA, and you're listening to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. As you just heard in the intro, my guest today is Matt. This is a bit of a new intro format that we're trying out when we have guests. So let us know what you think in the comments if you think it's a good idea, if you like it. Today's episode is going to be a two-parter of sorts on the topic of being aggressive in airsoft. And I don't mean being aggressive to players. I mean adopting an aggressive play style. This is something that we often hear airsofters talk about, most frequently in the form of feedback or constructive criticism. You need to be more aggressive, or how can I become more aggressive as a player? That kind of stuff. And it's a pretty broad topic, and answers can be, I'd say, extremely situational, which is why we needed two-parter. Originally, I was going to record this with Matt and Jordan at the same time, but a few life events got in the way. So now you get to listen to two episodes about the topic instead of just one. So lucky you. So let's talk about Matt for a second. Matt's been on the show several times, so our returning listeners will be familiar with his usual antics. But for those of you who might be new around here, Matt primarily plays CQB style airsoft. That's not all he does. Obviously, he's a well-rounded player, but that's his bread and butter, his meat and potatoes, his, insert analogy here. CQB is a fast-paced game. It's relies on quick decision-making, individual skills, and sort of just-in-time tactics. And that's what makes the difference between winning and losing. And it's easy to assume that to be good at CQB, you need to be aggressive. But what does that actually mean, right? What does it look like to be aggressive? And if you're feeling like you're not aggressive enough and you want to improve, how do you actually go about that? So that's what we're going to talk to Matt about today. So Matt, thanks for being with us, man. It's always great to have you on.
Of course, it's my favorite place to be that's actually not on an airsoft field.
Awesome. Well, let's start off. I guess it's important to talk about this. Like, for you specifically, what does being an aggressive player in airsoft mean?
Well, I think that's an awesome idea, right? The whole, what is it to each person individually? Because when we were originally talking about this on the Discord, which everybody should be a member of, Jordan and I were talking about it. And Jordan and I obviously play very, very different airsoft, right? He plays the long format, super in-depth, super cool sounding games that a really dedicated airsofter needs to be in to enjoy those sorts of things, I think. I play a lot of skirmishes. There's almost always renters on the field when I'm playing, unless there's some sort of special event. There's 4 or 5 fields these days, and dude, I'm so happy about that. It's growing in numbers, right? But they're all relatively small. We don't have like a big woods ball field. Our outdoor fields are just bigger versions of our CQB city fields, right? There's a bit of cover, there's some weeds and everything. And so it's a little bit of a different game, but it's still all about moving up, getting around somebody before they get around you, and controlling the entire play space as you need to in order to take your objectives, right? So aggressive play for me is looking at how we need to get the objective and then moving towards it in the fastest way possible to strike before the enemy can, essentially win and then destroy them in mass, because we're super cool like that, right? In theory. So what aggression looks like in that kind of game is we look at who's the fastest guy do we think, right? But we know that if we're on a certain field, Nikki's fastest or Chase is fastest or whoever, and like, where are we going? What sort of options do we want to make? Does anybody know this field really well, right? We looked over the field and this is what we're going to do. And I'll give you a great example. When John Summer from the Discord came out to play, we went to Sac County Airsoft. And before we started playing, he and I walked around the field and we looked at the 2 spawns and we looked at the different places. And we played some games against the other team. And it really helped. We were like, hey, this is this building is this color. It's right next to this thing. We need to flip the brick, say. So what we're going to do is right off the bat, we're going to sprint down here, carve a left, sprint down, flip the brick. You take up a position here. I'll take up a position here. Your boy's back there. We've got this on lock. And that's what an aggressive, like a basic aggressive, like push for me is, right? And for me, that's how you win at objective-based CQB airsoft. Uh,
It's really interesting what you're talking about because what you're describing is very sort of it's deliberate and it's thoughtful. It's like, okay, so we understand the layout of the field, we understand what we need to achieve, right? But here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then we're going to sort of execute on that plan. And I think for many players who are like, okay, I need to be more aggressive, a lot of times, and I know I've fallen into this trap before, it just turns into, okay, I'm just going to do a charge. I'm just going to like barrel down the field. And typically that doesn't tend to work out very well in my experience because it's not, as well thought out or supported with, thoughts and logic. It's just spur of the moment. Oh, I'm going to try and go and be, like the BB operator, the Delta Force guy, running, cornering, doing all this kind. And in reality, you run out, you're out of cover, you get shot, and that's it. Right?
exactly. Like if you take the time ahead of time to think about that, because I'm not going to say there's no time when you should just go charging forward, guns blazing. I have plenty of examples of those, but that is not the only aggressive move. For me, being aggressive is about violence of action. Is just executing as quickly as you can on the objective,
Yeah.
in the smartest way possible.
Yeah, and I think some of the challenges that come with that, especially if you're thinking about someone who's like, okay, I want to learn to be more aggressive. How do you then start defining that distinction between now I need a headlong charge, like that's what I need to do right now, or okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. I'm going to have that violence of action. Like it's not just about I need to go without thinking. It's there's a more nuance to that. And so how did you develop that, or how did that work out in your experience as you were growing as a player?
Well, it was really easy for me to develop it, and I didn't even realize it until you and I talked about it, that it's all about pre-planning and pre-thinking about your different paths. So in the moment, you don't have to consider them. When I play at CQB City, there are exactly 5 ways to get through the middle of the field from one way or the other. If I know the first one I would take to an objective, right, and I run into resistance there, I already have the second one. I know the next best path is through here. The next best path is through here. The next best path, I better grab some dudes. But you if you think about that ahead of time, you don't have to think about it in the moment. It's like when we do all our ready ups, and I'm going to tell you right now, doing a ready up in your living room is an aggressive action the next time you play on the airsoft field, because that little bit of your brain that doesn't think about this is now thinking about that guy and what you're going to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Every bit of brain power you can free up from the game and concentrate on the enemy is brain power that you're using in a more effective way. And then we can get into that a little bit more later about how to become aggressive as the game develops beyond the first few minutes, right? Because it's not all, we're going to deliver the bomb in 45 seconds, game over, Matt wins, we're great, right?
Yeah, because I feel like, and this has been my experience with planning. I mean, the old expression, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, which, I mean, it's like, there's some other stuff that I'm writing for the channel, but it's like, unfortunately for airsofters, the other team gets a say in how your day goes, right? But like, obviously, like you're like, okay, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to get the bomb in 45 seconds. Obviously, something is going to go wrong along the way, and you need then to readjust, right? So
well, exactly.
How does that work in your brain? So you've come up with a path that you're going to follow, and then you realize that within 20 seconds your limit of advance, you can't continue that direction, whatever. What does your mind go through as an aggressive player? Like how are you processing what you're seeing?
Usually I'll look at the openings that I know exist on a field, and once you run across any field twice, where you can at least start to know where the openings are and see where players would want to be and where they would come through most easily. And then you look for the heaviest firefights, and then you go around them and you shoot everybody in the back of the knee. Is really the best way, honestly, to be a sneaky, aggressive, like get up and murk people player, in my experience in CQB airsoft, is to see where the big firefight is and just flank them. Nobody's ever paying attention. Once those 50-50 firefights that we always avoid as listeners of Call Your Hits because they're not good, right? As soon as those start developing, as soon as you have battle lines, they won't, in a good game, in my opinion, there will always still be an opening somewhere around. If you'll run into issues when fields will get overcrowded and there are no openings and it's literally just trench warfare at that point.
Sure,
Whoever has more grenades. Uh, oh shoot, where was I going with this? This happens to me every time. I love talking about airsoft.
No, but I mean, but you're right. Like, most of the time, like you're going to see sort of channeling in like the typical fire lanes, right? Where that you always get into and I mean, we all know this. Like, if I think about Frontline, I'm going through it in my mind right now. I know exactly where firefights always, always, always happen. And so, to your point, if you know that, or if you're observing it, maybe even for the first time, be like, wow, these guys are fighting. Like six dudes are shooting at six dudes, and nothing is moving. That's your hint to be like, okay, well, I need to go around that fight, and then because they're not paying attention to their sides, right?
Exactly. And you can, uh, and I never push super far back. And I'm going to say this right now. I believe it's a dick move to charge the enemy spawn line where all the rentals are hiding and being afraid. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a guy who did that. I don't like him. I didn't like playing with him. I told it so to his face. He stopped coming around. Because I think that's a really mean move, is to purposely go after rentals. I never pushed that far. What I do like to do is get to the point where those rentals would be able to hit me, but they're not, because they're watching me shoot all their friends in the back.
Right.
And
Yeah.
On a lot of CQB fields, I hope, or like that I've played on, and it's been a few now. So I'm going to say I know a few things about playing CQB airsoft in a few fields at least. There's always like a few ways around and a few ways to control it, and a way for you to sneak through, whether it's the objective is over at jail. So I'm going to slide through kill house while everybody's shooting out that direction or whatever. And then you capitalize on that. And once you want to get better on that, you just watch the other people who do that, and you pay attention to your fields and the way people play, because there's patterns in the way everybody plays, in the way every game unfolds. I mean, you can't always account for humanity, because at some point there's going to be some screaming kid who's like yay tall running through with a pair of AAPs going full auto and just hits you 15 times in the chest, right? And you're like, oh, that 8-year-old just murked me totally. Oh, I fall down.
But it's interesting what you're saying about observing the players, because if I'm, very soon we're going to play together, and I'm going to get to observe you, and I'm going to get to see how you play, but I'm not going to understand what's going on in your head. And I think the challenge with a lot of observing the players, especially aggressive players, and some of the challenges that I've had trying to observe some of our local players who are more aggressive, is if I just do what they do, I get shot, right?
Right.
Because I don't understand what's going on up here, that is educating and informing sort of what they're doing on the field. So if you were to narrate, for example, what you're doing on the field, like you shared some of your gameplay videos with us before, and I was, looking through it and whatnot. If you were to narrate that, what's going on in your head, what would we hear? Like, what would that sound like in terms of your thought process?
Okay, so I'll tell you, I have a great example from the Airsoft Challenge program, and we talked about my quest with the JJs to
Right.
get the uranium rods and deliver them. And so I said, guys, this is how this field is laid out, right? And I looked at them and I said, okay, this kid's got a GAT. He can shoot full auto. He's not going to be super accurate, but he's going to be great for suppression. He's a little shorter. His brother's a little taller, longer legs. One of them is going to go running. One of them is going to hang out with me and suppress, right? I'm going to take the slightly full auto, like the heavy player, right? Who can lay down a little more suppression with me. And so I'm like, okay, guys, let's do this. We're going to go ahead. We start charging forward, and I'm looking around. I'm like, where are the enemy players? The most likely places for them to come are around the left of the trailer, around the right of the trailer. Where are J and J? Okay, little J's back here. Big J's already up by the spool where I told him to go. All right, coming up, we jump up in the trailer. All right, little J, you get right here by the door. Lie down, go prone. Nobody's going to expect your tiny little corner with your GAT just sticking out.
Yeah.
Let's see, let me get my camera angle. Like this much of him, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, so they're both set. I don't need to worry about them. If one of them goes down, we'll deal with it when it happens. I don't think it's going to happen because we have a very, very good position. And we took that half of the field before the enemy team was even out, right? Like we were both set up. I was on a window. Little J was down prone and I could see out. And I was just like, okay, now where are the most likely directions for them to come from? I know that their spawn is over there. I know that they're likely to come around the bus that's in front of me. I know that there's a chance that they'll come through kill house to our right. So I'm going to look over there every now and then. I don't think it's very likely because that's where Fatal Prescription, I misnamed them last time. That's where they were hanging out, was in kill house, just like being a vicious murder squad. And so I didn't really have to worry about that direction. So I'm like, okay, look, there's Chase, there's Lars. That's all handled. Okay, Big J's out there. How much time is left? Okay, 30 seconds. Oh, there's the enemy. Let's take them. And so then little J and I suppressed. And I'm like, all right, little J, you just fire a few seconds, wait for me to fire for about 5 seconds, and then you fire for a few seconds again. So that gave us like a chattering gun situation, right? Where he's like, and I'm like, tat, 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 tat. And that's enough to keep 20 freaking dudes back if they're all forced to come around the same direction towards your really excellently made up spot. And said,
Yeah.
okay, everything's going well. Okay, time's up. Where is Big J's gone? Outstanding. He's ready. Little J, we're going to give him 30 seconds because that's how long it would take me to run backwards and get about halfway across the field. Once he's that far, our guys are going to be protecting him. I don't have to worry. And so we stood and we kept firing. Nobody pushed on us. They tried, bless them, but like it was like they were just coming in the same alley, so we were blowing them away. And I'm like, all right, little J, when I say it's time, I'm gonna book it out here, grab this other uranium rod, follow Big J back, fire out of here for 30 seconds, and then do whatever you want because we're gonna win the game at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. I jumped out and I booked it, and I pulled out, swung around the trailer, grabbed the uranium rod, pulled my pistol. I left my rifle with Jay. I just left it there on the trailer, pulled my pistol, ran with the uranium rod, booked it all the way as far as I could, kept my pistol up because you don't just lower your weapon while you're going, even behind friendly lines, because you want to be careful. There are other players who are just as sneaky and aggressive as you, and you need to remember that if you're going
Yeah.
to try
Fair
to be
point. Fair point. Yeah.
so be ready for that because I did tag one enemy player who was like deep. I would not have expected him, and he shot like a guy to my left. I'm like, oh no, bop, and caught him as I went over and dropped the rod in. Saw that we had all the rods, and I'm like, okay, we won. Make sure the ref knows. Wave your arms at the ref station. Be like, Gavin, we did it, we won. Blows the whistle, and that's that. But that's that's a bigger field, a more objective based thing, right?
Yeah.
Grabbing all those 5 rods. It was a fairly long round and a fairly in-depth process.
What's really interesting to me in what you're describing is that you're being very aggressive, but you're also not charging down the field. In fact, you're being very aggressive about purposefully holding a position to enable you to win the game, as opposed to being like, okay, well, I'm going to go, and just push as hard as I can, because it sounds like, and, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's not what the situation warranted, right? It warranted you finding the best possible spot, taking your 2 Js and like tucking them away so they could get a good lane of fire, and then just figuring it out, right?
Exactly, because we had to wait the 2 minutes, and I highly recommend anybody who does this kind of game do that sort of thing. It was a perfect touch, made it so much fun having to hold that position while we waited until we could collect the items. It was cool.
Yeah. So being aggressive is a lot about, especially I guess, being successful at being aggressive is a lot about in the planning and the consideration, right? And then you also talked to, sorry, go ahead.
The more you prepare, like I said, the more you can concentrate on the fight at that second. And if you don't have to worry about anything else, like you're already planned out, you're already muscle memoried in, it doesn't matter. Luck and enemy skill obviously play into it, but you're playing at your very best. And so you're automatically going to be moving, acting in an aggressive way without realizing that you're doing it.
Right. And then the other part that you talked about earlier, almost right at the start, was around this notion of like violence of action. And you hear that term get thrown around a lot in airsoft as well, because that comes from the real steel world and all this kind of stuff. What does that sort of violence of action actually look like in the context of airsoft?
It's you make a decision and then you stick with it and then you go, because you know that if you get it wrong, the very worst thing that happens is a bleeder.
Mm-hmm.
But by making the decision, taking the risk, and going immediately as you make a decision about something, you are the kind of player who's going to get up on the other player, who's going to get within range for even the cheapest, lowest range gun to get kills, right? You're going to be the player who's grabbing the objectives, who's making the team work, right? Then you need players like that who are willing to go up and do that. And you'll see players without violence of action, without decision, right? They are the ones in the 50-50 gunfights, and they sit there and they shoot at one guy and they shoot at one guy, and then one of them gets out and they call their hit and he moves over to another corner if he's smart, if starting to learn some stuff, and then he does it again and he gets in a different window and he finds a different dude on a different piece of cover and they shoot at each other. And you want to avoid that. And you need to, everything about violence of action, everything about aggression, to be successful, it's just do it, right? You don't sit there and you don't think all day. You make some decisions beforehand. You already have those locked in. Otherwise, your personal skills are where it comes into play. Your reaction time, your ready ups, all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
If everything goes to heck, you're still just laying down fire. Uh,
Yeah.
but if everything doesn't go to heck, and you get just that perfect, like I there is a guy there. I need to curve this way. I have to shoot this way, and you're like, sure, I could have gone right. I could have sprinted. I could have ducked and started firing from behind cover. Instead, I went left. I'm left-handed. I feel like I'm gonna get my out behind first and get the
Yep.
drop on the dude, and I did. In this particular instance, I had a bomb rush game where I decided on my best decision was to go around the right side of the field with my pistol out because I'm left-handed and sneak through the alley and decide on it. And so since that was my decision, as we discussed earlier, putting your decision on lockdown, your path set with backup plans, right? In case things go poorly. With your path set, you don't have to think about it. You go. And so I was out there and I'm like, okay, one dude, snap him. Another dude, snap him. That was it. Deliver the bomb. Because I saw the dudes and like my first thought was just fire, keep moving, don't worry about it. Because either they're going to hit me, oh no, or I'm going to hit them, I'm going to get past, I'm going to win. And I did because they stopped as we ran towards each other. I kept running and shooting. They stopped, tried to duck behind cover. Ah! You can actually see it in one of my bomb delivery video. A dude comes up, I fire, he backs up a little, and there's a window. And I'm just like, whoop, snap. And it's just, if he had dedicated himself to the move he was making instead of stopping when he saw me and freezing, essentially, right, then he could have had the drop on me. Like, I saw him with his gun up, and instead of engaging me, he went, what do I do about this? I'm going to go back and try to get some cover. And that was the wrong choice.
Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, to be clear, like, and I think you said this as well, like, you can do everything right and still get shot. Like, that's just how it is, right? You come around the corner, you do the most beautiful ready up that the world has ever seen, the most perfect one, and you still get shot, right? That can just happen, right? But outside, so I think, you talked about the aspect of luck being a factor, and I think in CQB and environments, like, there is a fair amount of that because everything is happening so quickly, and the engagements are so close compared to the slow paced play that we'll talk about with Jordan at some other point. But so I think my question is, like, what is it that you see as the biggest point of improvement for the average, and I'll talk about like renters and stuff like that, but like the average airsofter at your field, what is it that they need to start doing more of, like, by and large, from your perspective?
If you want to be a more aggressive player and you want to get more kills, and these are important, either you want to get the objective or you want to get more kills, right? If you want to get more kills, never let yourself get bogged down in one of those 50-50 firefights. Fire at somebody, get out of the direction, find another avenue of attack. It will never behoove you, if you just want to kill or get a bunch of kills and get a bunch of BB hits on people, to sit in one spot unless you're a machine gunner covering an alley, right? Get around them, look where the firefights are, decide another path into their flank, and watch them squeal as you shoot them in the back, because it's hilarious, right? You shoot somebody in the back of the knee, they will almost without fail go, ah! And they make exactly that noise through their mask, through whatever they're wearing, and you're like, gotcha, right in the knee.
Yeah.
If the objective is your goal, right? And for me, it usually is. The best thing you can do is to make a plan ahead of time and hit it as hard as you can in exactly the right ways. If you want to get these points, take the points now and then hold them as well as you can. I'm going to use the game with John as another example. The one I was telling you about, the flip the brick. I actually made the plan for blue team. I was playing with John and I think his brother-in-law and his brother, and we were out there. And I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to book it straight down here. We're going to go left. We're going to go right. There is the container. It's got the brick on it. If we go, we will have it. And then like the ref's like, hey, we need a few guys on the other team. And I'm like, you know what? I'll do it. I set these guys up with a plan. They know I'm going to meet them there in the middle. And they didn't. They were too slow. They didn't sprint out. What I did is I knew where they were going to be. I went from the other end. I shot down that alley, got down, flipped the brick, got prone and like maybe 10 meters back and kept an eye on it. And maybe 30 seconds later, he and his brother came slowly around the corner. I'm like, guys, This was the wrong choice. I told you what you needed to do to win. You would have had a chance. They would have had a chance because there were three of them, and I was the only one who got there on my team within that first sprint. Like, I told them,
Mm-hmm.
I will be here. I will fight you. If you do this, you will win. And instead, they were slow about it and they were cautious about it. And I shot all three of them as they came around one at a time, trying to find me. As
Yeah, and
like,
that's interesting too, because like they're being cautious, and in your shoes, in their shoes, you were not going to be as cautious as they were. I think for players who are not that aggressive, and I mean we see that even here and everywhere. You have, and I'm not talking again about the renters who are just setting at the spawn line, which they got to learn. They're going to figure it out. That's okay. But you also see lots of returning players who, it's not that they're unwilling to move, I guess, or even to the extreme, like they're like afraid. I certainly think that exists out there, but like often, I find in my experience and sort of what I've experienced, I don't know what to do. Right? I don't know how to move. I don't know what to do. I don't know how fast is appropriate to be going. Like how do you work that in yourself? Is it just a matter of I'm going to go as fast as possible? If I get shot, I'll just run to the respawn and try again. Or is there
that's
some sort of other
basically it.
thought process? Okay, all right, yeah.
For that kind of game, when I know where my goal is and what I want to do, I'm even like, if you're fast enough, you can get back to spawn and get back on the objective before the enemy team is still there. If they happen to get like a nice long shot somewhere and you have to go back, if you're fast enough, it doesn't matter. And that can win
Mm-hmm.
those games. That'll take those games for you. And that was like a 10-minute flip the brick, whoever had 5 minutes. And at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, the ref's like, okay, that's it. Blue team won. Or red team. I forget which team I was on at the time.
Yeah.
Point is, uh, and it's that easy if you're willing to take a little bit of risk. Uh, the worst, like the biggest holdback for people I feel and who want to get more kills or to be on the objective more is being afraid of getting out. Uh, Being afraid of getting hit, being afraid of getting out is something you have to just jettison. You have to throw it away. You can't be afraid to go back to respawn in an unlimited respawn game. When we have an objective, when we
Mm-hmm.
have a time limit, get your steps in, bro. Go for it. Uh,
Yeah.
for me, this is my exercise, right? So I push hard enough that it's exercise for me. I sprint as hard as I can within reason, right? Like I'm not going to hurt myself. And you can, after you've run enough, you know where your limits are, where you're like, I cannot run any faster than this, or I will hurt myself. I can't run any longer than this, or I'll hurt
Yeah.
myself. And so I run fast. I run as fast as I can within reason. And that's how I play. Yeah, I get out to the objective, and in CQB, that instant snap off in a 100-meter field, if you're 50 meters in 30 seconds after the whistle goes, it doesn't matter. You got it.
So you're talking a lot about how you play CQB at the fields that you are familiar with. How does your thought process change? How does your aggression change when you are transported to a field that you do not know, or that maybe you've played there once before, it's your second time? Like, how does that change for you at that?
I'll admit I usually use my first couple of rounds, my round or two at a place to wander the field, think about how I would play it, look at the openings, and a lot of CQB fields, like you can only put up plywood and connexes so many different ways, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so you'll see regular themes across fields, and it'll be shaped different or whatever, but you can get an idea of how you're going to play it and what you think your plan should be just by taking the time to look over the field. If that's not an opportunity, if you're like playing some sort of super cool game where they're like, we're blindfolding you, dropping you by helicopter, go fight, uh,
Yeah.
then it's a different thing for me, right? Because then I will be that cautious guy. I will wait back and I've got range. I'll wait for somebody who doesn't have as much range as me to go forward a little bit, and I'll be like, all right, let's go around this way, try to figure out what we can do. There was a lot of that at BFLA, and that's when I stuck myself with my team, right? And I made sure that I always had battle buddies and options, because the only thing that's better than intelligence and like accurate intelligence is battle buddies who also have at least a vague idea of intelligence, right? Like when I got
Mm-hmm.
lost out there, Sam and Chaz were like, pop, pop. And that's how I deal with a place I don't know. I work as a team, right? I leverage my force multipliers like other people who are more familiar with this kind of environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it is a team game, and I think we kind of, I think, forget that in a lot of contexts on the airsoft field. Like, it is a team game. So you're not there being some sort of like elite operator. Like, there is an objective that you're playing. Now, if that objective is team deathmatch, then more power to you. But if there's an objective, you have to play the objective, right? And you can do all kinds of cool guy stuff that you want. But if some guys run into the objective like you are, capping it, and then the timer runs down and they just win, what was the good of that, right? So, and to your point as well with teammates, like how you are utilizing your teammates is very, very important, because like you said, like it's not just about, oh, it's an extra gun, but it's an extra set of eyes and ears and everything else, and extra options potentially. How do you think about those options as well? Because so yeah, we talked about create a plan, you create your line, like this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to execute. Now you're in a situation where you don't know how far you can plan it out. How do you review your options, or how frequently do you review your options as you're moving on the field? Like, what does that process look like for you?
In a situation where I don't know what's going on, I always form a team if I can. And there are very few times in airsoft where you're not going to be able to find one or two dudes, even if you're brand new on a field, and be like, hey guys, come with me, let's bunch up, let's figure something out. And then once you're actually talking to a few dudes, you look over their gear, you talk to them, ask, hey, how do you like to play? What is something you like to do? What are you good at? I see you've got this gun. Do you like to play this way? You've got your gat, are you full auto capable? Cool. So I'm going to use you for suppression. What about you? Oh, I see you've got like a, what did he have? Like an M4, like it's just regular M4. And he just had like a regular M4. And I'm like, okay, so this is your first game. You're new to this. Not to say that everybody who uses a basic M4 is new to the game, but I haven't seen a field unless you're doing an impression, I haven't seen a seasoned player with just a stock M4, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so you're going to need a little direction, but you're obviously going to be enthusiastic. If I can keep you away from the BB fears, then we're going to be just golden, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other situations, it's like, okay, look, you're obviously like a very seasoned, a very good player. Do you play around here often? Do you play these situations often? Do you have a radio? I have this kind of radio. Are we compatible? Can we talk to each other? What kind of gun are you using? Do you have grenades? All those things give you options. Like I look at this dude and I'm like, okay, he's carrying 2 EG-67s. This guy's got a few flashbangs. We can take a building and we can take it fast and hard and do whatever we want. Oh, look, this guy's got like a long scope on his long gun. Obviously, he likes to shoot from a distance. I'm going to take him around to the left side of the field, and we're going to see what we can manage out there, because I like to flank left, and nobody ever considers going to the far flanks. It's just airsoft games. You'd think a chess player was playing them from the top down, right? Because everybody gravitates towards the center and then just sort of exists.
Yeah. So I want to come back to something that you were saying. So, and it's kind of off topic, but I'm curious about this. So you have a rental player at your field with just a stock M4, and he's afraid of the BBs, right? And you say you sort of do a bit of like trying to like get them not afraid of the BBs. How do you do that? You specifically, like when you're dealing with a beginner, how do you try and make them not afraid in the situation they're in?
The first thing you have to do is just like make friends with them. You're never going to get somebody to charge forward by running next to them and yelling, hey, you're being a weenie, let's go. You need to be a friendly person. You need to be a friendly presence, but you also need to establish that you know what's going on so they feel comfortable, right? The guy who's standing around at the field going, guys, maybe we should make a plan is not somebody you want to roll with. You're going to be like, I don't think I want to talk to you. You seem like you don't know what's going on here. But you also seem like you're trying to do like leader stuff without having enough information. So you need to establish yourself as like why you need to be like, hey guys, I played a few times. You guys want to play with me? Or you need to be like, you guys look like you played a few times. This is what I think. What do you think? What are you guys doing? Is there a way I can be an asset to that? And just talking to somebody for a while, you can tell if they're more experienced or more familiar with the field player than you, just by asking them a few questions and being friendly and being like, okay, you guys already have a plan. I don't need to think of anything. Here's what I usually do in this situation. What do you guys think? And they'll be like, well, why don't you stick with us and we'll go through this way. You said you like that area, right? I'm like, okay, that's cool. And that's a really good thing, is just being friendly to people, and they'll tell you everything you ever need to know about them as an airsoft player, because we all want to talk about airsoft all the time. If we're the kind of person who is either listening to this podcast, on this podcast, using the podcast and videos and the Discord as actual resources to make themselves a better airsoft player. And if a person wants to be a better airsoft player, they're going to consider other play styles, other players, and get their opinions on things and consider how they can work with them to make themselves and the community better.
And when it comes to the beginners in particular, like I've had tons of players on the field over the years, very young players, like, 13, 12.
The best thing you
And
can do with
yeah,
them
they're
is get them in a
afraid,
position to
right?
kill.
Like they're legit afraid sometimes.
Yeah, the best thing you can do though is get them in a position where they're going to get a few kills, uh, and it's going to be easy for them. And you don't want, and I wouldn't do this at a field that I wasn't very familiar with. Okay, I wouldn't grab a rental at, like, if I was out at Feel Good Farms for whatever reason. I'm like, all right, cool. I would, you rental, come with me. I'm new at this field. But if I was at CQB City or All Patriot or now Sac County, I would, grab him and be like, hey, listen, here's the way we're going to go. You're going to come with me. We're going to go over here around this route. There's nobody going to be here. You have to stick right with me though, so we can get through, right? And you explain it to them and say, this is the path we're going to take, and they're super unlikely to be here because I play here all the time. Almost nobody ever goes that way. We're gonna run around. We're gonna get up in the chicken coop, and you and I are going to shoot this one alley, and that's not going to expose you to a lot of fire, is what I'm thinking in my head, right? But it will put you in a position where people are going to come through and they're not going to be paying attention, and you'll be able to get a few easy kills, and that'll get their confidence up. And once they're actually forward and they're playing, they don't notice the hits as much. And once they've had a few hits, then they stop being as afraid, I feel. Once you've played a few, once you've charged, and once you like run full bore into somebody and they shoot you in the chest at point blank, and you're like, this is great. And you go back spawn, you're like, well, I'm not going to be slow ever again. This worked.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that's really good advice in general. I mean, we've talked about this before, like working with beginners is all about making sure that, they have a positive experience. And like you're saying, like once they get a few kills themselves and, they get shot, they get accustomed to it, especially if they get shot in a situation where, they don't feel like they got murked. Like they did some work and then they got shot and they're like, oh, that was fair. Probably that lessens the fear. The other thing, and it's one of the last sort of things I want to talk about, is people who are listening to you talk today, they could very well be under the mistaken impression that you never get shot ever, and all your aggressive pushes work perfectly, and you do all these left flanks and they always work fine. But the reality of airsoft is we are here to get shot as well, right? And so I'm sure that in your experience, you have had lots of aggressive plays that have not worked out, right?
I'll tell you.
And so what does that look like in your brain, I think is my question for you. It's like, what does that what happens? Like, what do you do?
Like, how do I react when I'm like,
no, so like,
dead?
Well, so you got shot. So firstly, you call your hit, whatever. But like, I think for a lot of players, especially who are trying to learn to be aggressive, you're like, I'm going to be aggressive now. And you run out of cover and you get shot. You're like, well, I'm never doing that again. Right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'll give you a few bits of advice that I picked up over the year being a very close range player. It's even if you practice transitions every day, a little bit of extra padding on your leading arm and your gut is a really good idea. I'm going to tell you, 90% of my bleeders over the years have been, I was going to say, mostly on my right arm, my stomach right here, and a little bit on my left arm and hand from going in. As you go in, you got your leading arm forward. This right here, I've got a paintball pad on there now because I don't mind getting hit. I'm not looking forward to coming home looking like I just got, lit up at point blank all day, which is how you look after CQB. If you take proper precautions, you'll be more confident though too. Like I wear knee pads, solid, hard knee pads that I've tested out thoroughly and I know fit really well and I know can take abuse. I have an elbow pad on my other arm, so I know if I run into something, I'm not going to hurt myself. And using the right kind of equipment like that can increase your confidence and allow you to move forward a little bit, right? If you're afraid of getting struck at close range, if you don't want to get hit, like if you don't want it to hurt all the time, go with a chest rig. I'm a big proponent of the belt kit, but a chest rig can sit right here. You have a dangler and it'll cover those CQB shots and it'll make the experience a lot more pleasant, a lot less painful for you. I find a BDU is plenty of cover, but some places run a little hotter. Just by taking a few precautions like that so that you're more comfortable at closer ranges. So you don't think about the fact that I'm going to go home bleeding. You think about the fact that my pad's going to take this, but I might be hit still. But on the flip side, not so much that you're not going to feel your hits. I use enough gear that I'm like, if I run into something myself, I'm going to be fine. The majority of hits, I'm going to be fine. But I'm not looking to add a bunch of like extra clown gear, plate carriers,
deltoid pads, like bicep,
deltoid pads, like the nut plate and all that stuff. Nonsense, right? Straight up, leave that stuff behind for me. I don't see except for
Yeah,
thematic.
unless you're a juggernaut at your field for whatever reason for a
Yeah,
game, like different conversation, right? Yeah.
exactly. But if you're skirmishing, be a skirmisher. Try out your
Hmm.
milsim gear if that's where you do your milsim. But just like you don't want to see me wearing exactly this, which is a day of skirmish gear on your milsim field at your your American milsim or your milsim West, a bunch of rentals and skirmishers and regular weekend dudes aren't going to necessarily want you pulling super heavy duty milsim crap on them on their fields because that's not always fun. And you
Hmm.
need to
Totally.
consider the places you're playing and the way that they play around there. Uh, like if I went out to, I believe it's Carolina, I forget if it was north or south, but they've got the association out there where all their games are green versus tan. I'm not looking to show up as being the jack wagon in the red shirt, right? Uh,
Hmm.
Read the room. Don't ruin the game for everybody else, which is an important part of airsoft for me too.
So, and then the other piece that's really important part of airsoft for you and for us is sort of like the learning from your mistakes part, right?
Oh,
It's
dude.
all about sort of like improved sort of performance over time comes from analyzing sort of what went well and what maybe did not go so well and what are you going to do next time. So, how has that worked out and shaped sort of your attitudes on the field and your aggressiveness on the field when you're going to do this left flank and you get shot right away or whatever?
Well, then you need to adjust just as quick to your plan B, to your plan C, to your plan D as you react to fire, right? If I go around left and I get murked right away, there's probably a dude. There's probably two or three dudes out that way. I don't want to try that one again right away because I'm going to run out there and
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be the same guy who capped me and he's going to be waiting. So I'll instantly go to my plan B, try my next route. But when I'm still got the energy early in the day, early, more often lately, late in the day still, at the beginning of the round, I'll figure it out by getting myself killed a dozen times, right? I'll run across to the left side of the field. I'll run down the middle. I'll get some kills. Maybe I'll hit an objective along the way. But the fastest way to learn what's going on in the field is to die and respawn.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
die a lot, all right? Like on a perfect day, right? Golden day of airsoft for me, I'll get twice as many kills as the next guy. On a standard day of airsoft, I walk back to respawn 3 times as many.
Yeah. And so, and I think that's an important aspect. I think a lot of players, we've talked about this on the Discord before. Like I feel that, keeping track of your like kill death ratio is a little cringe. Like, I mean, it's not what we're here for. But like at the same time, like that doesn't mean that you're never gonna get like the best players are never getting killed. Like, of course they are all the time.
Constantly.
What the difference is when you get killed, what do you then do about it, right? Like, what did you learn from that? And are you just because I don't know if you've seen this. I'm sure you have. I've seen it countless times. I kill a guy because I've got a really good fire lane, right? I shoot at a guy, hit him, and he comes right back. He comes to the exact same spot right where I just shot him from like 2 minutes ago, and he goes
All
respawns,
the
comes
time.
right back. I'm like, bro, why did you just do that? Like, what? I mean, like to me, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Now there's some games where you'll like get up in like a good like Overwatch position and you'll shoot the same five guys over and over because they're
Oh,
coming back to the same five spots. And you're just like, guys, what are you just? Are you doing this in a pattern on purpose? You making?
yeah, and
We doing? And then they'll just be like, all right, guys. And that's exactly what you want to avoid: is being predictable, is doing the same thing every time, is to be where
mhm.
the whole thing, like be where the enemy doesn't think you're going to be. And that's the point of being aggressive. If you're fast enough, they don't know where you are. But that's also mean if you move the right direction, if you pull back at the right time, if you sneak around very quietly and slowly while they think you're at somewhere else, that is an aggressive action.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think, to summarize some of the things we're talking about, like there's a huge part of being I think just to summarize it a bit, there's there's a big, 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 big difference between being aggressive and being reckless,
Yes,
right?
running
And
forward, guns
often,
blazing
yeah.
is a thing. It should not be the only thing.
Hmm. Yeah, so you have to have a plan, right? You can't just willy-nilly just charge down the field and say, as I'm going, like you all have this idea of a guy like walking down the field or running down the field, and it's like, bang, bang, quickly move over, and he's like shooting five guys while moving on the run and all this kind of stuff, which is sounds super cool guy operator, but like really, that may work for one game, but for you to be able to repeat that will be basically impossible,
No, that's
right?
like that. Those are those magnificent airsoft moments that you live for, right? That live in your head for the rest of forever is when you get one of
Yeah.
those situations where you get 5 or 6
Yeah.
kills in a row. That is not an everyday thing for even, the top players, right? Uh, like even the best dude is not 6 times better than a moderate dude, right? And there's way many more moderate dudes out there. Uh,
Hmm.
and we all have to accept that there's a lot of other players out there who are playing just as hard as us, who are either younger or faster or smarter or a little bit better. But no matter how hard you train, no matter how hard you push yourself, no matter how fast you are still only a human playing a game. And there is
Hmm.
somebody who's going to be pushing a little harder and faster some days. And that's not bad, okay? It's okay for you to not be the best dude on the field. You just want to be the best dude you can be on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the person who is like, okay, well, I want to become that player. Like, I want to become more aggressive. I want to be like the order here is you need to start thinking a bit more about what's happening on the field, and a little bit less about what you have to do specifically. And that comes to what you were saying at the beginning, like a lot of this goes into planning, a lot of forethought, and like, okay, this is what I want to do. And something you talked about that we didn't really dig into a whole lot, but it's like committing to your plan, right? If this is what you want to do, and I can distinctly remember many years ago, I was running from a piece of cover to another piece of cover that I had identified. And it was a pretty long run, like it was maybe like 20 feet or something, right? Not really long, but you get what I mean.
Right.
And halfway through that run, I saw that there was an enemy in the same direction that I was running. And I stopped running and I decided to back out the way that I was coming about halfway through. And I got shot immediately,
I
right?
remember you talking about that on the podcast.
Right? And if I had kept going, likely, I mean, I still might have gotten shot at another point, but it's very unlikely I would have gotten hit in that precise moment, right?
That,
And
that is a
so,
good little tipsy tip right there. Airsoft BBs, even on the fast guns, are not moving that fast, right? If you got a small
yeah.
gap between cover and you book it across there, nobody's going to be able to adjust fire to hit you. I can't tell you how many
Mhm.
times I've run across a gap and like 2 or 3 seconds later you hear like behind you and you're like, you're too slow, adjust your fire.
Yeah. Or like if, you're going to get hit because those BBs were already in the air,
There's nothing you can
literally
do.
there's nothing you can do about that, right? Yeah.
Actually, I do find, and I do think about this, is I almost always go right after a barrage has hit my cover because I know that they're going to be like, however long their burst or their couple of rounds is like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and a lot of people form patterns, or they'll just be like, you'll notice after a while that they're cracking off 5 or 6 rounds and then giving a few seconds and then doing the next. So if you hear it hit, you're out there as they're firing, pulling the next trigger. It doesn't matter if they see you go because they're not ready yet and you're gone.
Yeah.
Little tips like that.
That's a really good tip. And I think, especially um, when you're talking about people who are hesitant to be aggressive and hesitant to move, that's something that you can apply the very next game that you play. Just listen to for those patterns, and then as soon as you hear that break or that break is coming, because people randomly shoot 4 or 5 shots consistently for whatever reason.
Right.
Okay, well, you just shot 4 shots. I'm going. As soon as I hear that fourth one, I'm gone. Chances are they're not going to hit you, to your point, when you move cover. And ultimately, I think when it comes to people who are wanting to be more aggressive in a CQB context, right? What you said, I think, is really important for people to remember. It's like, don't be afraid to get hit. There's no shame at all involved in getting hit. That's literally a part of what we're doing here, right? And you got to learn from that, right? Like you got to be like, okay, well, I did this and I got shot. That doesn't mean don't do that again, but it does mean you need to think about whether or not was that the right plan. Did I execute the plan the way that I wanted to? Yeah, so I think that it's a um, really good framework, I guess, that you're laying out for people to sort of follow a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, dang, that's an awfully kind thing of you to say. I
Well,
had another
well,
thing
I
to
mean, I'm
say
just
out of
saying,
my
like,
head.
you have way more years of CQB experience than I do. So, like, when I'm thinking now about going back when our season starts up about, CQB, like, there's no reason that we can't be having a conversation. Be like, okay, what can I learn from Matt? Because I think that's an important part of the community that we have too. But it's like, what can I learn from Matt and try and apply here that might help me be a little bit more effective, a little bit better, learn a little bit more from my mistakes, rather than just being like, oh, I'm just going to run flank left, Matt flanks left, I'm going to flank left too, and then just get shot right off the rip because I was stupid, right?
I'll tell you right now, I only flank left on the north spawn at CQB City because if I do it on the southeast spawn, it's dumb because it arcs around right.
Yeah.
That's when I do all my offhand shooting, by the way. And I'm glad that we did shoulder transitions, ready ups. Man, you can't say how, there's no saying often enough how important ready ups and shoulder transitions, and to a lesser extent, reload drills, are to your everyday game. Just the more of your processing power you can free up, the better of a player you're always going to be because the faster you'll be able to react to every situation. And if you
Yeah.
want to be a skills player, right, you want to be that personal skills uh, player. If you want to be the vicious Terminator deathmatch guy, then you need to be ready to exercise in that way, to dedicate yourself to it. A large part of being a better player, and it's not just aggressive, though I said it was an aggressive action earlier, is practice. Like there's no getting over how much just standard drills, regular practice, your fundamentals can improve your gameplay, can make everything so much easier on the field. Do ready
Yeah.
ups. Do them right now. If you're the kind of guy like me who has them on your wall, do them. If you're not, uh, next time you have your gun out, next time you're thinking about airsoft, when you're listening to this, if you get home and nobody's like hanging out in your room, because I'll admit it's embarrassing, like somebody's in your house and you're like, hey, honey, I'm going to go do my airsoft practice, right? Uh, do it, dude. It's your thing you love. I do it with my daughter now. Every day we do 30 ready ups together. It's the best.
That's dope. But it's just you're absolutely right in terms of like how you can't, replace that. I remember vividly when we started doing shoulder transitions and really shooting offside. I remember coming up to a piece of cover being like, "Oh, I can't use that piece of cover because it's on my offside." Now, I don't even think about it. Right? It's no literally no factor in my brain. It's like, "All right, Johnny, you can take right, I'll take left." Get on left, and then I'm entirely 100% focused on what's in front of me rather than like, oh, am I going to be able to shoot that guy if I have to shoot him from my left side? Of course I can, because I've done it now, conservatively 1,000 times, right? Once you get to that point, like there's just that doesn't hold you back anymore. And I think that speaks to your point just now. Like being an aggressive player is a huge part of it. In CQB in particular is all about not having to focus on you, focus on everything else that's going on, right? Focus on the plan, the objective, the other players.
Just so, sir.
Yeah. Well, listen, Matt, it's always great to have you on the podcast. Love to have a conversation with you. And then we'll have the same sort of style conversation. It'd be interesting to hear what Jordan has to say about how aggression varies in a milsim style setting with like in a team-based environment, etc. I think a lot of the things you're talking about from personal skills will certainly apply or transfer at least in some way, but it'll be interesting to hear his take. But we'll leave that to him.
I'm looking forward to it, dude. Honestly, like Jordan is one of my favorite dudes on the Discord. We play a very, very different game of airsoft, but everything he does makes sense to me. He's like, I need this for this game, and this is exactly why I need this item. And he still minimizes while carrying everything he needs for a milsim, and just I can appreciate that mindset, bro. Good for
Yeah,
you.
we're gonna get to roll together and at Iron Horse in a couple of months, and it's gonna be something else, guys. Thank you so much for listening, Matt. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. If, like Matt mentioned multiple times, if you haven't joined the Discord, what's wrong with you is all I can say about that. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for listening. That's all we've got for you this week. Take care, and we'll talk to you next week.